This is carburetor off Kawasaki engine from a John Deere. This happens to be a John Deere 185, but this is a pretty common carburetor, wouldn't you say?
I would say so.
You've seen one, you've seen them all. Got this little $12 kit online. Might use some of the parts, might not. Here's some of the tools we're going to be using, and a little carburetor cleaner. Why are you cleaning it? Why is that important?
I'm going to remove all the grease and the gunk from the outside of it before we take it apart.
Okay.
Next we're going to take off the bowl. That's 10 millimeter. Sometimes these can get pretty tight. Pay attention to which way your drain screw is. This is a screw for the drain only. Now there's some junk down in there.
Okay.
This particular carburetor, the engine had a surging problem. I understand. This is the float assembly, and it's held in there by a pin. And this pin has usually got a side on it that is flat, which means it'll only come out one direction. Sometimes you can pull them out with a pair of needle nose. Sometimes on the older carburetors they would just pull right out. I've even had to use a nail or a punch or something to drive it out. You have to be careful, because if you break one of these legs off, you're in trouble. Have you had that out? You need a new carburetor.
No, sir.
You have it?
I have not.
Well, I may have to.
Just pull it out from there. Alright, got that pin out of there.
Now your float will pull up and it will have a needle on it. And the needle fell off of this one. This is what shuts your fuel off when the carburetor's full.
How does it hook on there?
It's got a little clip on it. Not all of them have that clip. This one does. It clips right into the center, and it'll hang like that.
Okay.
Now these have a little rubber tip on them. If that rubber tip gets worn or notched, then it won't shut the fuel off, and the fuel will keep running through your carburetor and fill your engine. Also, if it gets a little dirt under this, or a hair or anything, it will not seat into this orifice here.
Alright.
So this is where your gas comes in. It flows down, fills up your bowl, and your float shuts it off. Now there's a little O-ring in here that actually seals the bowl to the base of the carburetor itself. We're going to replace that. Next we'll take this idle screw out. It's always a good idea to count the turns in and record those, and that way when you go to put it back together you can get it close to where it needs to be. Your final adjustment can't be until the engine's running and it's warm. Then you can adjust this finally. But okay, there's half a turn, one, half a turn, 3/4, 1 3/4
Is all the way in.
is all the way in.
So when we reinstall it, we put it all the way in and back it off 1 3/4.
That is correct. That is your idle mixture screw. The old days, these carburetors had a main jet mixture screw on them, but these are a fixed main jet. The EPA put the kibosh to that because they didn't want you adjusting your carburetor. Okay, the main jet will be our next target. It is down inside this stem. They can be a little difficult to get out if you don't have the right size screwdriver.
We're not worrying about numbers of turns here, or are we?
No,
Right.
they're a fixed jet. We're just hoping it'll come loose. Okay, it's threaded. Now it is loose. It's a very tiny jet, and it has a hole through the center of it. Sometimes it doesn't take much to plug that hole up.
Yes, sir.
We'll set it over here, out of the way. Now, that jet threads into another jet, which takes a little different screwdriver to get it out. See if I can get it broke loose. Ah, I think she broke. This is the jet, but this little one, it's actually like a standpipe. This is what your main jet supplies gas up to your center of your carburetor, where it mixes with the air.
And the secret to getting that out was having a screwdriver that's kind of straight, as opposed to this. See how there's one.
That's the narrow
This
blade.
guy tapers out, and this guy has no taper on it, so he reaches in there and gets a firm grip, and reaches all the way across that thing and doesn't strip it out.
Okay. We'll take this. This is holding a vent in place. It's
What's
just
the
a
vent?
screw and a bracket.
And what's the vent do? Just allows air in there? Mixture?
It's a vent for the bowl. And that screw there is tight.
Not being a nice impact.
So,
Can't get.
I'll use a pair of vice grips to break it loose. And it doesn't have a big function. It just holds, it screws a retainer down that holds the vent. And the vent looks like a little jet itself. That is it right there.
Let me get over here and tilt that. There you go.
A rusty retainer.
Rusty indeed.
Okay. We'll take out this vent. Now it's not really screwed in there, it's pushed in with an O-ring. The reason it's slotted is where this retainer fits in that slot. We should be able to pull it out of there with a proper tool, which I don't have. Well, we'll use a pick. There's the pick. Well, it's not coming out of there.
Yeah.
And it's the only thing that's holding it in there is an O-ring. Okay. We're having trouble getting this little air jet out, so we're going to use a screw.
One that just happened to be laying here.
And kind of get a little bite on it and then pull it right out like that. And there you see the little O-ring on it. There's no threads, but it does have some holes in it that are going to have to be cleaned.
Mm-hmm. So
We got this now. Alright, there's one more item in there. Got to keep your eye out for. The little pipe that this jet holds in place. That is the final thing to come out of there.
And if you're not careful, that thing will just fall out on you.
It can.
And roll under the bench or whatever.
That's right.
We don't want that.
It's got little orifice holes in it too, and they all need to be cleaned. What I usually do is blow through all this with the carburetor cleaner and compressed air and make sure all those holes are cleaned out. That's the last part that we're going to take off and clean, yeah.
So let's review these parts then.
Oh, that's the pin for the float, and there's the needle valve which shuts the gas off, very important. The bowl, the gasket, the idle. This is the pipe that goes up through the carburetor, the center of the carburetor, which has this jet and then the main jet. This is your air vent jet, and this is the retaining screw that we had such a hell of a time getting out of there.
And then over here is just a screw that holds the bowl on.
Right, this is
10 millimeter. All right.
And it does have a gasket on it. And this is your drain screw. You might want to take it out and clean that out if you think there might be some dirt in there. Basically, it's just for draining the carburetor. Alright, I'm going to blow all these out with carburetor cleaner. Blow out all your orifices, and you blow it out with compressed air. You're not going to hurt anything except for your camera lens. Now all these brass parts that we aren't replacing, we will clean with carburetor cleaner, and I like to use a brass brush, or this in here is a nylon bristled brush. We want to clean all those off as good as we can possibly clean. You really don't want to use a steel wire brush if you can get away without it. And when you're done, you should be able to
now, why
see
do you
through
not
these.
use a steel wire brush?
It's
Damage the brass?
yeah, it damages brass, and it's can cause corrosion because it's dissimilar metal.
Okay.
So, but a brass brush is the best that you can use on these brass items naturally.
And get these guys cleaned up to where you can see through them.
Yep, you should be able to see through them, and I have even taken a small wire to make sure. You don't want to enlarge the hole any, but you do want to make sure that a wire will pass through the hole.
And the wire to use is an E string on a guitar.
Banjo string or a guitar string works really good.
Save those cutoffs, boys.
Yeah.
And girls. Alright, we're going to just run this little banjo string right through there. Look at that. Isn't that dandy? And do it through every one of them. Anything that'll fit in. Stay. Then we get this guy. Or not. I'm going to run that through there. As far as putting this all back together, nothing needs super uber adjusted, right? You just put it all back together the way it was, and the only thing you got to remember is that 1 3/4 turns we did on the idle.
Basically, yeah.
And everything else just goes right back together the way it was. Snug, not too tight.
Try to clean all the oddball collars off of your brass.
And for what it's worth, this $12 kit I got online, the only parts we're actually using out of this kit are the gasket for the bowl, the, what do you call that, float needle? Needle for the float.
Yeah.
Replacing that new.
The needle valve is the technical.
And then one gasket on the 10mm bowl. The 2 gaskets and the needle valve. That's it.
Usually you're best off if you can use the original equipment. The jets and the float. First off, the pipe goes back in there. I don't know if you can see the pipe in the center there.
Now let me see that.
But that is where the pipe is. That's where this jet screws into, and it does your mixing in there. Then next, this jet, the one you have to have a fancy screwdriver.
Fancy. Here it is.
There's not a lot of surface there for your screwdriver to grip on. Right.
Narrow shaft, wide blade to get onto that thing. Otherwise you'll tear that brass.
And you want to tighten it snug. Next goes your main jet.
Easy to drop.
Easy to drop. It takes a narrow bladed screwdriver. Kind of got to move it around to get her centered. Then it threads into the jet that we just installed. And you snug it down pretty good. And I don't know if you can see the end of that or not.
We'll see what we see, and that's it.
But okay, next we'll go up to the air vent.
O-ring survived the cleaning.
The O-ring did. We'll probably want to put a little bit of oil on that O-ring. I usually use WD-40, a Vaseline or something. You don't want a real thick coating, just a small lubricant. A little bit of pressure and it will seat just fine. You want to line it up so that your clamp lines up in the groove.
Right. How common are these carburetors?
Oh, this was
Is this
off of John
specific
Deere.
to Kawasaki, or is it on all John Deere's, Kohlers, etc.?
It's pretty specific to Kawasaki's.
But as far as carburetor parts and stuff, cleaning things, the principle's the same everywhere, maybe.
Basically, yes.
So our clamp is in this groove.
Next, we will put our idle screw in. Remember the turns, I think it was 1 inch or 1 3/4 from the bottom. So we'll screw it in and seat it. And don't screw it in tight. I mean, there it's seated. There's a half. There's 1. There's a half. There's 3/4. Now after you get the engine running and it's warm and it's idling, you can fine tune this and you'll be able to tell the difference by the way the engine runs, if it's running smooth out or not. So,
okay.
float assembly will be next. Assuming that your float is good. This is a new needle valve. There's the old valve. It attaches onto your float. There's a tang there, and it hangs out, and it actually...
What'd you call it? A tang?
A tang.
Isn't that special?
Yes.
Never heard of that in there.
This sits down inside of your inlet pipe as such, and then your pin goes back in. Remember that one side of your pin has got a flat on it and it will not allow it to go all the way through. So you kind of line it up with the hole in your float, the hinge.
There it
There,
is.
it's in there now. It can't come out. I usually tap it just a little bit to seat it in there. But you don't want to tap it too hard, because if you break one of these ears off,
You might as well buy a new carburetor.
You might as well. Now the bowl gasket. Fits into a little flange.
I'm still thinking about the tang.
And it stays in place there. Now we got to clean this bowl out a little bit.
What?
It's got some dirt in it. Okay, the bowl is ready to go on. It's been cleaned. The bowl nut with a new gasket. Make sure the bowl is seated on the gasket on the carburetor. Position the screw to where you can get to it when it's on the tractor for draining purposes, if you ever need to drain it. And then tighten up your bowl screw.
What's the name of that tune? So we put it on and try it out, right?
You need to put her on, try her out, replace the filter. Make sure that your rubber line is in good shape. You don't want to rebuild these and have dirt go back in there if you can help it.